everyone, and welcome to this month's LinkedIn Live. We have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Catherine Price, and she is the award-winning writer, speaker, founder of Screen Life Balance. She's the best-selling author of How to Break Up with Your Phone. I have to say, I've been thinking about that so much, Catherine, ever since you and I have this scheduled of how to break up with your phone, and I've really been trying to break up with my phone. And then also The Power of Fun. Catherine is a journalist, and her TED Talk on fun was the second most viewed of all TED Talks in all of 2022. And we're actually going to be having a book giveaway, both of her book, The Power of Fun, as well as my book, Workplace Wellness That Works. So you can see there that AJ has popped that in there, and she'll give you the opportunity to be able to sign up for that. So Catherine, first and foremost, welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I would love to know where you're coming from. And for our listeners, please pop in the chat where you are coming from. I'm in San Francisco right now, although I just came back from Ohio late last night. And right before that, I was in Fiji. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But Catherine, where are you?
I'm in Philadelphia. I was in Philadelphia over the weekend, and I was also in Philadelphia last week.
All right. And is that where you live, or are you there for traveling?
I live in Philadelphia. I'm from New York originally, and I live in Philadelphia now. So yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, it's so good to have you. So I want to kick us off with, you started off with your book where you asked the question, when is the last time you had fun? And you went on to explain, I'm serious. Think about it. When was the last time you felt exhilarated and lighthearted? When was the last time you really felt alive? And the last time that I really felt that sense of kind of true fun, as you talked about, is actually last week when I was in Fiji and I was surfing, and you and I were talking a little bit about this before we got on. So, and I was on the same wave as an Olympic gold medalist, and she and my fiance were encouraging me. I have this huge fear of waves, so just being out there was so fun. But you described in your book that it kind of, the whole thing that teed this up for you was that you took this guitar lesson and you kind of felt this exhilaration of really having fun. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was what actually was coming to mind for me in terms of the last time I had fun, which was, it's less exotic than what you just said. I was just playing music in a parking lot with some of my guitar friends. So, which makes you don't have to be in Fiji with an Olympian, although that is also great. No, the reason I had written How to Break Up with Your Phone, which is a book about creating a healthier relationship with your devices. And in the process of doing that and following the plan that I was coming up with, I ended up spending less time on my phone, go figure. And then I had this kind of moment of like, oh my God, now I need to figure out what I actually want to do with my time, because I'd gotten so used to allowing my time to be filled by whatever was on my phone. I kind of lost sight of that. So I ended up asking myself this question I asked people when I was researching how to break up with your phone, and I invite everyone to ask yourselves this too, which is, what's something you say you want to do, but you supposedly don't have time for? Because the average person before the pandemic was spending about 4 hours a day on their phones, which is like 60 days a year. So we actually do have more time than we realize. Anyway, I ended up deciding I wanted to learn how to play guitar, and I signed up for this evening class. It was at a children's music studio at night. So it was a lot of parents. And the experience you're referring to was my realization that being in that class with these other parents and just spending this hour and a half playing together, not just playing the music, but just playing in kind of like a attitude way, really was exhilarating and boosted my spirits for days afterwards. And I realized that the feeling wasn't because of the skill we were acquiring. Like, that was fine, but it was really the feeling of just lightheartedness and letting go and release that came from this hour and a half free of all responsibilities. And I got very curious about what that feeling was. I realized the best word to describe it was fun. And then I started to look into what fun actually is and what's known about it, and realized, oh my goodness, there's this like gaping hole in our knowledge about this, and I should write a book about it. So that is what led me to write The Power of Fun.
And it's so interesting because you talk a lot about this idea of kind of true fun versus fake fun. And if this is something that we hear all the time, like, oh, that was fun, or let's do something fun, or so-and-so is fun. But often I feel like it's kind of more just, want to be able to have bragging rights. I did X. but maybe I didn't actually have fun, although I purport to have had fun. So tell us a little bit about that kind of true fun versus fake fun.
Well, one of the first things I realized when I was researching fun is there's not a good definition of it in the dictionary. Because if you look in the dictionary, it basically says that it's enjoyment or amusement or lighthearted pleasure. So it's like nice, but it's really not that important. And it almost seems a little frivolous and not very high in the priority list. If you ask people to tell you about moments in which they had the most fun, and I really encourage people to think back on their own lives and just think what stands out to you as having been so fun, they'll tell you about these memories that are actually in some cases, peak memories from their whole lives. So there was a real discrepancy. And it made me realize I would have to come up with a better definition of fun. And so my definition of what I think true fun is that it's a confluence of playfulness, by which I mean like a lighthearted attitude, not caring too much about the outcome, not taking yourself too seriously. So playfulness, connection, because in the vast majority of stories people shared with me, there actually was another person involved, sometimes a dog, but normally a person. And then flow, which is being so present in your experience that you actually can lose track of time, but very actively engaged and present. So not distracted. So I came to believe that when you experience those three states at once, like playfulness, connection, and flow, the center of that diagram is what I call true fun. And to answer your question, the reason I call it true fun as opposed to just fun is that we do tend to use the word fun really casually in our everyday speech. I've come to believe we're often even sloppy about it, not deliberately, but just because we haven't thought about it that much. And that leaves us really open to marketers telling us that things are fun when actually they don't produce this feeling of playful, connected flow. So if something doesn't actually light you up inside and doesn't give you that joyful boost that true fun does, that's what I call fake fun. It's a product or a service or an activity marketed to you as fun that doesn't result in that feeling. And number one culprit there is definitely social media for most people. It's something we do with our leisure time for fun, but you actually don't feel good afterwards. So I like to think about our leisure time as broken into those categories because it makes it easier to choose what to prioritize. And as one side note, I also think, if you've got, this is hard because we've got mirror image things going on in this video. But anyway, if fake fun's over here and we want to get rid of that, and true fun's over here, and that's this high energy, nourishing, amazing state we want to prioritize. You also have like a whole bucket of activities that lead to enjoyment that might not be full on fun, like reading or doing something solitary, taking a bath, going for a walk. That's also really great to do with your leisure time. But I like to be able to kind of put them into buckets because I can then choose what I need in that particular moment.
One thing, well, first of all, for our listeners, please put in your comments, put in any questions. So here's a question. What is a moment where and AJ is actually asking that. So if you want to share what your favorite moment is of when you've really had fun, not just fun, but true fun as Catherine is describing right now. But, one thing, Catherine, that really strikes me and is just, I feel like that we live in a culture not only where there's kind of a mandate to have fun and all that, whether or not that's actually true fun is kind of debatable, but also that there's a mandate to always be happy. And I particularly was struck by that in Joan Didion's book, The Year of Magical Thinking, this book in which she describes the loss of her husband and kind of, need to be sad for her at that moment. But she felt all this pressure to be happy. And I'm wondering if this pressure to be happy or this pressure to have fun actually makes it harder for us to have true fun.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting because you have what you're talking about on the one hand, this pressure to be happy and to say we're doing things for fun. And then we also have the feeling that fun is frivolous and shouldn't be prioritized because there's so many things in the world. So we really tie ourselves into knots there. So yeah, I don't think we should be pressuring ourselves to do either of those things. You need to experience a full range of human emotions. But I will say that I do think it is very important for us to recognize that fun is actually really valuable. Also to separate it, and I think this does tie into why we feel pressured. We think that to have fun, we need to do more activities, and our schedules are already totally full. So then you feel this pressure, like, when am I possibly going to do things for fun? And now I should. And then you feel just like you're failing in every area of your life. So one thing I really like to emphasize is that fun is a feeling. It's not actually an activity, because all of us have experiences where you do an activity that was supposed to be fun and it's actually not fun. You've probably had surfing things where it wasn't fun, right? But you're doing the same activity. There's something serendipitous about the feeling of fun. So I really want to clarify that, because one way in which that's very freeing is it means you don't have to be in Tahiti. You don't have to be on vacation. You don't have to be anywhere exotic. You don't need to be packing something extra into your schedule to have a moment of playful, connected flow. In fact, you're probably already experiencing those moments. You're just not recognizing them as such. And so you're not giving them a name. And so you're not fully benefiting from them. So I actually think that's very freeing. And in terms of the connection between fun and happiness, I think it's really interesting that we have this pressure to feel happy. But if we actually asked what happiness is, that's a whole philosophical conversation we could have.
Mm.
It's a lot easier to identify whether or not you've had fun. Like you could just
Mm.
think, this past weekend, did you have fun? You probably can tell me pretty quickly whether or not you did. And I think one of the things really wonderful about fun is that when we are having fun, we are happy. Like you're not going to be unhappy when you're having fun. It goes with the territory. And to me, that actually was a really useful revelation because it meant that I can stop focusing on being happy. I can instead focus on trying to put myself in more situations where I'm likely to have fun. And if I do, and if I have more of those little moments, my overall life will be happier, but I will feel that way without having to like put it on a to-do list, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and that's where fun kind of becomes the bucket list thing that we kind of have to check off, and then it actually starts to feel like work as opposed to fun. And how might we do what we're already doing, but do it in a more playful, fun way? And we've
Exactly. I
got
mean,
a question here from David Kennedy.
sure.
If the first element of fun is lightheartedness, does competitiveness kill fun, or can you have both?
Yeah, it's a great question, which really touches on the fact that even though I believe that playful connected flow is like a universal state of fun, each person reaches that state in different ways and in different
Mm.
contexts. So I would say that for some people, competition would kill the fun because they'd feel too much pressure. But for other people, the competitiveness makes it fun. So there's
Mm.
no one answer to that. I would say just reflect on yourself. Like, when is the competition adding to it for you? And when does it cross that line? Because I think we all have experienced a situation where that one person is like caring too much about the game of taboo or whatever it is, and suddenly it's not fun. When you're like, it's just a freaking game, like those moments, that's when it's crossed the line. But it depends on the person. And that speaks to the broader point where it's very important to recognize that the things that lead to the feeling of fun for you are not necessarily going to be the things that lead to fun for other people. And so one thing I recommend that people do if you're trying to figure out how do I have more fun, right? Because that's a very amorphous goal, is to ask yourself what I call fun magnets are. So try to think of what activities and settings and people often lead to fun for you. It can't be guaranteed. Fun is like romance, you can't force it. And as I
Mm.
said before, fun itself is not an activity, it's a feeling. But there's certain activities that are more likely to lead to that feeling for you than others. Like for me, playing guitar and singing with this group of friends is very likely to lead to fun. It's a fun magnet for me. It's not for my husband. And so it's really interesting to kind of reflect on your own fun magnets and then see how they do or don't compare with some of the other people in your life. Because then you can, carve out time for your own and then also support your partner or your friend or whomever in their own fun magnets. And then you can also identify the ones you share and make sure to prioritize those. Like I see someone commented in the chat that they'd recently had people over for dinner that they wanted to get to know better, and like that's something my husband and I really love doing together. That's a fun magnet. So it's all about like figuring out what leads to this feeling so you can prioritize them.
I love this idea of fun magnets and kind of identifying what are those fun magnets, and also being clear about the fact that what might be a fun magnet for one person might be just the opposite for you.
Yes.
Um, but I know you're starting to bring this into the workplace, and you describe it as funtervention. And so tell us a little bit about bringing fun into the workplace, particularly when I think a lot of workplaces maybe feel like that's something that should not take place in the workplace.
Yeah, well, you can have a fun intervention in any context, but I've been working
That's
with a group of people who run this company called Funmentum Labs, and they specifically focus on using what they call productive play in a workplace context. And we've been hosting these live workshops on the second Tuesday of every month, specifically about how to incorporate more fun into the workplace, and which everyone's invited to join. And you can sign up at katherineprice.com. We'll drop in a link. But I think one of the biggest revelations I've had when I've thought more about fun in the workplace is that a lot of times people think of fun and work as separate. And so you're trying to take fun and put it into this like context. So it's like, well, let's have a happy hour. Or, I did an event for a company that was like, we're going to have a fun day. So we're putting Jenga in the break room, and it was like, okay, I guess you could have fun playing Jenga in the break room, but I also think probably a lot of employees feel this kind of like, well, what now I have to play Jenga in the break room. Like it's instead of recognizing that if you're having fun in what you're doing in any given moment, you will enjoy it more, hopefully, obviously, but you're also actually going to be more engaged and productive and collaborative and creative. So if you can actually make the work fun, that's like a superpower for, I mean, it's amazing. So you can do that in a lot of ways, but what we've been doing in some of these fun interventions is some particular practices or exercises that the Funmentum team uses all the time to actually make work itself more playful. So just to give one example that I personally love, there's a practice called Worst First as a brainstorming exercise. And the idea there is that if you're asked to come up with ideas for something, especially in a group setting, it can be really hard to come up with ideas, and it can be even harder to share them because you want them to be good, right? We all have this like inner critic, and then you might actually have external critics from your team.
Right.
Kind of
The performance element, right?
exactly. But if you instead flip it and you say, all right, let's spend like 5 minutes coming up with as many horrible ideas to solve this problem as possible. And it both opens up your creativity and it becomes fun. So in the context of this workshop, we were trying to brainstorm how can you make people feel more connected in a workplace setting when everyone's remote, a very common challenge these days. We sent people in their breakout rooms. They had like 5 minutes to try to come up with 30 ideas. Like that's how quick we're trying to get people to go. And people came back and they were laughing and they had these like horrendous ideas, like mandatory unmuting of everybody on the call, or start every Zoom call by making a comment on each person's physical appearance, like horrible ideas. But we had these listed, and the idea was that, okay, we laugh about it and like enjoy it, but then it's like, okay, are there seeds of any good ideas in here? And every time we've done this exercise, there's always like a seed of a good idea. And so you take that and build on it. So to me, that's a perfect example of how you can work to make work to make work itself more playful and connected and help people be present. And if you are able to achieve that, people will enjoy themselves and you'll end up doing a better job at work. But it doesn't require you to have a happy hour or have like the, Connect Four on a coffee table or something like that. They should be integrated more.
It's interesting how so much of the fun is really kind of being present in the moment. And we've got a number of comments that have come in here. One, really appreciate this acknowledgement of fun as a feeling that doesn't require an extra effort, activity, or vacation. I realize I've been having fun working out with friends at the park, and I'm focusing on that rather than adding evening social events to my calendar to experience a perceived idea of fun. And so again, I think that's really interesting. It kind of ties again to your kind of true fun versus fake fun, and perceived fun, I think, is another great way to recast that.
Yeah, I think that that's a really wonderful place to start, actually, is scan through your current life and recognize what you're already doing that leads
Right.
to this feeling, and then value it and prioritize it. So for me, it's like, I started taking that guitar class, I think in 2017. It's Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 8. I do everything I can to not miss that. That is sacred time in my schedule. Like my husband actually schedules work trips to try to come back so that and I do too, so that I can be there for that hour and a half. And, different people out there have different versions of that, but it could be really easy to write it off as being like, oh, that's just my guitar class, or like, oh, that's just that morning workout. I can just, it's more efficient if I just do it alone. Like I'm busy this week. So it's really important to actually say, wait a second, like that actually is really fun for me. And I mean, I can talk more at length about this, but that doesn't just feel good. It actually is extremely good for our physical health. That's actually very important. And so those moments should be at the top of your priority list, not things that you kind of just wave away because life gets busy. But I do love that idea of like, notice what you're already doing. Don't turn this into another assignment yet. Like just figure out what you're doing and maybe you can build on that.
Somebody wrote here, take the pressure off of performance. Love that too. So again, just kind of like, how do you ensure that what you're designating as quote fun is actually fun and not just another thing to do, which actually diminishes our fun. So talk a little bit about what is, more about the value of fun that, I feel like we live in this culture in which it's not okay to have, I mean, it's kind of like we should be having fun, but at the same time, it's not okay to have fun, especially when we're at work and it's not as important as other things. And speaking of fun, my cat is wanting to join us right now, but tell us a little bit about what is the value of that, of fun?
Well, yeah, so it's fascinating. So there's not a good definition of fun if you look in the dictionary. There's also not very much research on fun per se. I think in part because we don't have a good definition, and also in part because we don't value it. So one of the top hits I found when I looked at PubMed, the database of biomedical literature about fun, it was a paper that said putting the fun in fungi, and it was about toenail fungus. So like that's like where things are. But it's very interesting because if you break down fun into those three parts, into connection, playfulness, and flow, then actually there's lots of research on those three states and how good they are for us, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. all three of those states increase our I think you should have fun just because it's fun. Let me just throw that out there. But if you want to have
Right.
justification, it actually really does increase your creativity and your productivity and your efficiency and your enjoyment, all these good things. And I think that for me, one of the most interesting aspects was the physical part of this, because I think, now many people know that being stressed out is bad for you on a physical level, which has to do with increased cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone that, helps us deal with acute physical threats, but it's actually really bad for us if it's elevated chronically over the long term. Less known, although increasingly so, thankfully, is that isolation and loneliness have the same effects. Like those also increase our cortisol levels and there's a very well-regarded meta-analysis that found that being lonely and isolated was the equivalent in terms of health risks to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's very serious. The Surgeon General just issued an advisory about loneliness and connection like 3 weeks ago because of this. But I bring that up because, loneliness and isolation and stress are bad for us physically. Having fun is a state where you are, by my definition, socially connected and you're relaxed and open. And so I think it stands to reason that actually has the opposite effect on our bodies. And so having fun actually has a benefit physically. So my point being, it's the opposite of frivolous. It just tends to be what we have at the bottom of the list, especially our own fun. But it should be the opposite approach. I truly think that if we were to have more fun and prioritize it, we'd be healthier and the world would be a better place. And in terms of that, just to hit one more point, is that when you have fun with someone, you really connect with them on a human level. Like you don't see your differences. I've heard so many stories from people about times in which they had fun with someone who was a totally different political persuasion or a very different background. The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu had a ton of fun together, despite the fact that they had radically different backgrounds. So it's really a unifying force that brings out the best in us.
And I think Desmond Tutu is one of the best examples of curious. Okay. He just really wants to be part of this. But just, I got to hear him speak 3 times, and here he was working on such serious issues, presiding over the Truth and Reconciliation Committee following the end of apartheid in 1994. But he just had this way about him that was so playful and saw the lightness in life. And he even described how God has a really good sense of humor. And if you heard him speak, he's laughing through a lot of it. And so it's so interesting how you can kind of tackle these really serious issues and yet at the same time have a playful and fun demeanor. So we have a comment here around fun. Instead of scrolling through email and news feeds on our phones in the evening, my husband and I have been listening to music, not just turning it on for background noise, but really listening to the lyrics, getting curious about the story behind the songs, and learning new things about the band or artist through a documentary or published articles about them.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic, two fantastic things to point out there. One, yes, scrolling through your phone is not going to be nobody. I've got thousands of stories from people around the world about moments in which they had the most fun. And I can tell you that I have not read any that were like, it was really when I was on Instagram late that night. That was so fun. I mean, it might be like you're using your phone, but it's not the scrolling stuff. But I think that music, really listening to music example is just important on a number of levels. One is that it's not just background noise. Like you're saying, you're actively engaged in doing this. You're doing it together, and then you're using it as a structure to have further connection and engage with this other person. And it's a useful framework to think about, because maybe your thing is not going to be listening to music in that way. Maybe that's not the structure that leads to fun, but what is the structure that leads to fun? I mean, I think about this as kind of playgrounds, that each of us have different metaphorical playgrounds, by which I mean a structure that makes it easier for us to let go and connect in a different way. So some people find that literally through a game, like a sports game where there are rules, or, a board game or stuff, but you can also have examples like the one that listener, viewer, whatever, participant just shared. It reminds me of another example a friend of mine shared when I was writing the book, where she talked about how she and her husband like to watch Hallmark movies, and normally I would say like watching a movie is not true fun because it's very passive, but they actually use that as a jumping off point for kind of like a Mystery Science Theater 3000-esque, if anyone remembers that show, commentary, where they would watch the cheesy movie and they'd made a game out of trying to predict the dialogue what the person would say next. And so it went from just being this passive consumption TV experience to using that as the sort of playground for them to banter with each other and laugh, which is exactly, I think, what that person's talking about with listening to music. So just think like, what are things like that in your life that allow you to let go and engage in a more playful way?
And so many of these things are things that we do with children. Like, when you're reading a book with a child, you're, kind of predicting what's going to happen at the end and kind of having more fun with it as you're doing it. So Eric says here, fun leads to people laughing together, which has so many benefits.
Yeah, and laughter is a very good tell. If you're having fun, you're going to be really smiling and probably laughing. So if you're laughing in like a full-hearted way, you're probably having fun. So that's a quick, easy kind of litmus test. But I would also say, yes, you do that with kids, but can I say something? Kids are not always fun, right? And it's like, I'm a parent, like, I just want to say that because I think there's a real pressure, speaking of pressure, to think about parenting as this joyful, fun thing. And it is not that all the time. And grown-ups, we need fun for ourselves, and that's okay. I just want to give people permission for that because like, it's not always fun, but I will say the more fun you're having for yourself, the more fun you'll be able to bring to parenting. It's really important to fill up our own tanks, but it's not always going to come from our kids. And I don't think that's talked about maybe as much as it should be.
That's a really good point. And that parenting so often is, putting all of your efforts into ensuring that your kids are having fun and meanwhile draining your own batteries, not having fun yourself. And that's not leading to fun for anybody here. So tell us, if you would, we've covered a huge range of different aspects of fun, kind of like true fun versus fake fun. And how do we define what that is? Why does it matter? What are ways that we can start to integrate more fun into our lives? But what would you say are the top 3 takeaways for our listeners today?
Okay, so take away the idea that fun is playful, connected flow, and it's a feeling, not an activity. That's one thing. Playful, connected flow, and it's a feeling. And then I would say that it is essential for your happiness and health. So it's not frivolous, it's actually essential. And then I would say the third thing is I want you to come away giving yourself permission to prioritize fun for yourself.
So the 3 being connectedness, that it's playful, and that it's, now I'm forgetting, and it puts you to a state of flow, and that it is essential, not frivolous, and that you really need to start with yourself. If you're going to be fun, bring fun for others, you have to start first and foremost for yourself. So we are going to be having, as we mentioned at the outset, that we're going to have a book giveaway. And so be sure that you sign up for that. Catherine, can you tell us how people can stay in touch with you and also follow your work?
Sure. Yeah. The best way to do so is to sign up for my newsletter at catherineprice.com. There's also a free fun toolkit you can sign up for on that site if you want. There's like free resources I've put together to start helping you identify your fun magnets. There's a fun compatibility quiz you can take with a friend or a loved one to kind of see where you match or don't match. So yeah, you can sign up for all that at catherineprice.com. And then, as I said, I've been doing these free fun intervention workshops the first Tuesday of every month. And there's actually a LinkedIn group for that. So if it's possible to drop the link in for that below, that would be awesome. But I announce it on the newsletter. So if you're on the newsletter, you'll find out about it. And the next one is, I guess, whatever, Tuesday, June 2nd, 6th, June 6th, I think. Whatever that Tuesday is. But it'd be amazing. You're very interactive and truly are fun. So I'd love for people to join.
Okay, great. And AJ will drop that into the comments here so that you all can access all of that. And to wrap us up, Catherine, I would love for you to talk a little bit more about kind of the work that you do where you are first and foremost a science journalist. And you have, I love the way you described it. There are things that you've kind of noticed in your own life, and then you want to pursue that more and share it with others. So to wrap us up, tell us a little bit about kind of what happened here that sparked you to want to explore this whole idea of the power of fun in the first place.
Well, the most immediate thing was just the curiosity about what this feeling was from the guitar class. But the reason, the power of fun is a pretty direct follow-up to how to break up with your phone for reasons I was talking about before. If you open up time, what are you going to spend it on? And the reason for that was that I had my daughter, and I realized I was having these moments where I would be up with her, feeding her or holding her or whatever in the middle of the night. And she'd be looking up at me, and then I was looking down at my phone. And I thankfully had the self-awareness to recognize that this was happening and realized that is not how I want to be parenting. I don't want her to think of that in terms of a human relationship. And like, it's not how I want to be living my own life. So that was really the moment for me that got me on this path. And it's been really interesting to see where it's gone. I'm sorry that people still need How to Break Up with Your Phone, but I'm also so happy to have been able to create a resource that helps people. And I'm hoping to do the same with The Power of Fun, and to help people really feel, more connected with themselves and others, and ultimately feel more alive.
That moment, I'm so glad that you shared that. And I, that was kind of a wake up moment for you when you noticed, oh my gosh, I'm looking at my phone as my daughter is gazing into my eyes. And I think for our listeners, for all of us to just really tune into those wake up moments of how we're really being disconnected. And I love, Catherine, the way you've really kind of grounded all of this fun in when we're really not only experiencing playfulness and being in the flow, but also when we're really connected with others. And again, tying to this sounding of the alarm by the Surgeon General about the need to tackle this rising loneliness epidemic. I want to share also this final: cultivating curiosity through connected experiences enhances our human relationship to each other and to ourselves, which naturally evokes joy, appreciation, and feeling of fun. Such a great conversation. Thank you so much to that LinkedIn participant there for sharing that. So the next time that we all get together will be on June 28th. I hope that you can all join us. This will be in follow-up to the celebration of Juneteenth. Catherine, I want to thank you so much for being our guest today. You're amazing. And if you have not had a chance to read her books, How to Break Up with Your Phone, The Power of Fun, and also to check out her TED Talk, you need to, and also follow all of her great resources that she provided. But again, thank you so much to all the listeners for joining us today. Catherine, thank you so much for being our guest, and we will see you all next month. Until then, have a great couple of weeks.
Take care. Thank you.